Hello and good morning and welcome back to the State of the Market property show for UK lawyers. I hope you're all well. We've been away for a couple of months having a summer break, but we're back and everything seems to be ticking along quite nicely. For those who haven't been on this show before, this is a stat show where we look at data provided to us by 20 Convey that will blow your minds, really. This is for those firms who do a lot of conveyancing work, for property lawyers anywhere, and for other people who are interested in that in the industry. And we look at data that's what is happening in the housing market today. Not what's happening in 3 months, what happened 3 months ago or 6 months ago. It's real live data gathered from the property portals and from the land registry, and we'll give you a real update on what things are happening today and what things might look for in the future. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our guest today, who is Mr. Mike Leeman from Bell Lam & Johnson. Mike, his firm is based in Liverpool, and of course he's a big Evertonian fan. That's right, Mike, isn't it?
Absolutely. Can't beat being a better blue, I wish. Thankfully, it's Liverpool from my point of view.
Oh, did I get that wrong? I do apologise.
You know that's the truth. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Right, and great. Mike should be at the Labour Party conference today, but instead he thought better of it and came on our show instead.
Much more interesting, much more informative.
I think so as well. So without further ado, let's get into the data. Quite a lot's happened since our last show in August. Well, of course, we've had the election and we're now starting to see how people react to it. There was a lot of thoughts 18 months ago, 12 months ago that there was going to be a property market crash, and that just has not materialised. So let's go and have a look at exactly what's happening. Oh, and I ought to say our thank yous as well. First of all, a big thank you to 20 Convey, of course, who provide the data, but also to Inside Conveyancing, who are our media partner and have promoted this. So thanks very much, Inside Conveyancing, and we obviously encourage all our viewers to go and have a look at their website and subscribe to their news updates. Really useful. Not to forget, of course, our Minerva conference is coming up on the 23rd of October, and if you haven't booked tickets yet, you definitely should do so. You'll hear a lot more data like this today, lots of interesting stuff sponsored by Groundsure. I'm really happy to have them on board, and it's on the 23rd in Birmingham. Okay, so the data. First of all, we're looking at here how many listings, how many new properties have been brought to the market so far this year. And as you can see here, we have the estate agents have so far listed 1,266,000 properties, which, quite incredibly, is more than at any time in the last 6 years. Mike, what do you think about
that? It surprised me it's that number. To us at the coalface of conveyancing and in our market areas, it seems normal. It feels like things are settled down after a crazy few years, and I say it just feels like there's a normal level and volume of transactions. But in readiness for today, I've had a look at our data, and we're certainly up in terms of inquiries and instructions from this time last year. So I suppose that's supported by that data in terms of the amount of listings and the amount of property which is available to be purchased and sold.
Yeah, we were just discussing before we came on air. Of course, these are listings, people putting their houses on the market. And I must also have a big thank you to Chris Watkin, who does a similar show to this for estate agents, who's provided some of these slides and lets us use these. So I will say thanks to Chris. Top man, great show, watch it every Friday. But the number of listings is one thing, but to you conveyancers, of course, getting the instructions earlier is quite important to you, but not many people do it, do they?
No, instructions is important, and obviously getting that relationship in place at an early stage can have effects really in the length of the transaction time, and obviously the convenience for clients at the outset. So there are things you can do in relation to that to get matters progressing as quickly as possible. But you're right; these are listings, aren't they? Don't always necessarily follow through to a sale because you obviously need to be a number of buyers looking for it. So that all supply and demand.
Yeah.
But I think there is good steady demand at the moment. I think there is some confidence. Mortgage rates have settled. They obviously came down a few months ago. rumour is they'll probably come down again at some juncture. But I think people now appreciate this is the new norm with interest rates. So in the last few years, those really low levels won't return anytime soon. And I suppose it's all about that consumer confidence. People are looking for the best time to make that move when they think it's financially viable for them, and they accept that is the status quo. They're more likely to make that decision. I think we're in that position now. This is normal. This is the new normal. This is the time when people will act normally and perhaps have some confidence in relation to property transactions.
Confidence being the big issue of the day, of course, because I think Labour have just perhaps overplayed their hand at the moment and have sucked some confidence out of the market, and we'll have to see what the budget brings at the end of October.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a key factor, isn't it? But I think this week they've been trying to change the mood music, haven't they? Because there's been a bit of negativity about the public finances, but they now seem to be trying to be more optimistic, because you understand that the messaging they give out has an impact on the market, and particularly in terms of consumers and what they do with their money and the high street and so on and so forth. So I think they've set out their store that things are tough, but there's plenty of optimistic about, and I think that's going to be the messaging going forward, I like to think.
Okay, that's all right. Let's just have a move forward then. So this is a really interesting graph that we show every month. Basically what we're showing here is the number of listings and how it varies per week throughout the year. So what you can see here is the large thick white line, okay, and it's going up and down as we go on through the year. But if you compare it to the pink line, and it's quite hard to see this, but the white line has been significantly ahead of the pink line, which was last year. So and it's followed the ups and downs. Now you can see halfway through the year we had those 3 dips. Those are because these are weekly instructions. Where the bank holidays come along, you always see a dip in instructions because of the bank holiday. They're only 4-day weeks. And again, if you look more recently, you can see the bank holiday at the end of August, we've had another dip. But fundamentally, the pattern is more or less the same for every year that this shows, whether it be 2017 right the way through to this year. The good news is that the number of listings is up on last year by about 10% or thereabouts, and has stayed that way for the majority of the time. Even in the last week, you can see the peak of this white line is above the peak of the pink line, and that's good news, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, that concurs with our transaction levels and those clients wanting instructors were nearly 20% up, like for like on this time last year. So that probably tallies in with that data. I think the only month we weren't ahead of last year's curve was August. August was a particularly strange month. I think this year, obviously, there's that dip with the bank holiday, but it seemed a lot of people went on holiday. A lot of people went on holiday for a significant period of time, and that has an impact in terms of people putting property in the market. And also has an impact on transactions, because conveyances are off, and depending on your size of firm, depending on who's in chains, human resources has an impact in relation to that.
Yeah, I've seen spoke to a few lawyers and a few different businesses, all saying it's been a bit quieter over the last 2 or 3 weeks for new instructions, and that's presumably as a result of this hangover of August. Really, how have you found the last few weeks?
We're up on this time last year, which is obviously our mark and our indicator where we're performing.
But compared to August, have you seen it recover a little?
No, it's recovered from August. We're certainly up on August significantly. So August was our leg. But you're right. There's always that drag, isn't there, between listing and STTC, and we normally get it 4 or 5 weeks after listing, if not a bit later, depending on when that sale takes place.
So Chris's next slide here shows just how many properties are actually for sale at the moment, and we're at 710,000. But just look how low it was just after COVID. So November 2021, that's when we hit a low of about 350,000, and it's almost double that now. So you can see a lot more properties for sale than there were at the COVID, and that's why house prices were starting to jump quite quickly after COVID, 21, 22, because of course there was no supply, there was no houses, and people wouldn't put the houses on the market because they couldn't find anything they wanted to move. Now, as you quite rightly said earlier, we're now in a more normal market where if you do want to sell your house, then you can find something to buy.
Yeah, and that definitely seems to be the case. I mean, locally, I'm in our office in McGull, which is a very urban area. a large housing stock, and there's certainly a lot more houses up for sale in the local area where I live and where I'm located this morning. So anecdotally, you can say that, and again, the data supports it. It definitely feels there's a lot more listing, there's a lot more activity, a lot more people now probably thinking now is the time to make that move that they're going to, because people have life cycles, don't they? Life doesn't change or stop.
No, yeah, it does.
And effectively, some people may hold back on decisions because the economic circumstances, interest rates, or things like COVID clearly had a massive impact. But as I say, it does feel normal, but I suppose there's that backlog of people who've probably been waiting a little bit for the right time to do it, and it feels like we're now at that point.
Fore. You feel as though they're coming to the fore.
Yeah, definitely. That's a conversation I'm having with clients. They seem to be saying that, and estate agents.
So just before I came into this to do this today, a young man asked me outside, do you think there's going to be a property crash? And I went, absolutely no way, not at the moment. There's nothing in the tea leaves that we're reading right now that would say there's going to be a property crash. There was a chap on YouTube predicting that 12, 18 months ago called Charlie, and I just don't see that happening. But some of these numbers are quite indicative here. We currently got 710,000 properties for sale. As I said earlier, after COVID, it was 360,000, so we have doubled. But compared to the last time we had a crash, which was 2008, there was 1.4 million houses on the market at that point. So it's half that amount. So in terms of supply and demand, which are the key elements of this, just keep this in mind. Yes, more people the more houses for sale, but we're a million miles off. Well, about 750,000 actually. We're at the point where there's so many houses that buyers have got lots and lots of choice, and the prices start to come down. That's not about to happen. Do you agree with that?
No, I absolutely agree with that. And I suppose the indicative thing is, what's the lending position where the last economic crash came from bad lending, bad credit, unsustainable policies and processes. There's appetite for lending. There's lots of capacity from the lenders at the minute to lend, which is why there's a bit of a war on interest rates, and some are lower than they perhaps are expected to be, given the Bank of England base rate, because they do have capacity and they have a thirst to lend. So yeah, I think that helps drive the current situation where it just seems normal, if not a little bit ahead of where it normally is. But it seems to be in a good place, and that seems to be the forecasting and the data supports it should stay like that.
Okay, so once we've looked at the number of houses coming to the market, people wanting to sell, the next thing we look at is what's the reality on the ground. And this is where the 20-year data and these graphs by Chris Watkin really, really help us, because not only do they show us what has happened, we can project forward with a reasonably good degree of accuracy what's going to happen for the rest of the year. And what other industry is there where you can get data that is basically going to tell you exactly how much work you're going to get over the next 3 or 4 months. This is great. So just looking at what we've got here, you can see the pink line. First, let's look at the pink line, and that was 2023 last year. And then our white line again is 2024. And again, you said you were up 20%, and that's about the right margin. You can see white over pink. Certainly in weeks 27, 28, 29, that gap's huge. You're going from somewhere about 20,000 last year to 25,000 this year. You know, more than 20% in some cases. And again, you can see the ups and downs of the bank holidays. But the really cool thing here is just look at how for every year that's shown here, 17, 18, 19 and 23, although there's been some ups and downs, the general trend is almost identical in every single occasion. So you start off the year and it's all very quiet in December, and therefore January picks up quite rapidly, and then you peak to a peak somewhere around week 19, week 20, which is obviously sort of end of May, June time. And then there's a slow but steady decline throughout the rest of the year. So what we can see here is that we're now mid to end of September. You know now that although the market's going to stay reasonably steady, it's going to be on a slow drop all the way through to November. And then come December, by the end of November, it will drop off into almost nothing by the time we get to December, when we almost... the conveyancers obviously remain busy, but your new business departments have got a twiddle in their thumbs. So you can see how that's going to how it's going to dive away. There's nothing in the pipeline unless there's some geopolitical event, and there's none of them going on right now, is there?
Not at all.
That might knock us off course. So I would say, for the moment, we're in a great place. We're up on last year. We're up on any year since the mid-teens, and as far as actual sales agreed. And this data is coming from one of the property portals, so we're knowing exactly how many sole subject to contract memorandums of sale are landing on lawyers' desks.
Yeah, and it is interesting. We've been tracking our data for the last 6-7 years in terms of where we are each month against the previous year, and so on and so forth, because trying to predict your pipelines is really important, and predicting where you're going as a business, so we can ensure we've got capacity, ensure our recruitment and retention, our training is in place, so we can support our clients and our partners in terms of those introduced work to us. And our trends are identical to those trends. When you're going to get quiet months, not to worry about a quiet December and a quiet start to January, because it always filters in towards the end of January, beginning of February. And I just think it's fascinating that, irrespective of where the economic situation is, the peaks and troughs remain the same, and it's consumer behaviour. People have those stages in life, and when it feels the right time to do things, and whenever normal events take control all the time isn't right. And I say we have a good understanding, I think, nowadays of consumer behaviour and why people do things and when.
Yeah, and you can see that, Labour have taken over in May, and they've got a Goldilocks scenario with a really quite decent housing market that shows no sign of abating, and therefore, and the housing market drives so many other things, doesn't it? Whether it's people going out buying carpets and curtains and new things for the new house, and it keeps lawyers in business, of course, and it keeps estate agents in business, and that's a whole chunk of the economy, isn't it?
It's absolutely key, and I think we've seen previously when there is economic difficulties or a crash, that the housing market is one of the key dynamics which is affected directly as a consequence of that, and there's a massive knock-on effect to the self-employed, the trades, the builders, all the things you need doing when you're buying and selling property. It's such a big part of our economy nowadays. The property market is instrumental. That a healthy one is important, and you think with a new government who seems motivated to try and improve things, whether they're successful or not, we have to wait and see. Can only be good for someone at the start of their term rather than at the end of the term where they're a bit directionless.
Okay, that's great. Let's move on. So just looking at those numbers in a little bit more detail, yet again, how many gross sales have been achieved so far? And okay, it's a fabulous number, isn't it? 888,000 so far in 2024, only beaten by those two post-COVID years when we had no stock on the market, but anything that did come on was selling like that. Yeah. So we had two crazy years in
one house.
Say again?
30 people after one house.
Oh, absolutely.
What a time to be alive.
Yeah. So we did have two crazy years in 2021 and 2022 that I don't think any conveyancing firm predicted. You just didn't have the staff available to be able to offer the service at that time. Not just your firm, Mike, and I'm not saying how much you suffered of it, but 90% of lawyers seem to suffer really badly during that time with staff retention, people working from home, and just the incredible volumes. It wasn't anyone's fault. It was just a function of what had happened post-COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it's understanding the process involved in terms of what's your capacity, how many people you need to successfully deal with each transaction. And of course, if you suddenly get that upturn in demand, and there's an infinite lack of conveyances nationally across the country, you can't just suddenly upscale, because to recruit can take 3 to 6 months just to get a lawyer. Yeah. Then you got to train. If you're getting non-qualified staff or more junior staff, they need the time to train. And we know for a fact, if we on board a new member of staff, or we're looking at our future projections, you sometimes don't get return on that recruitment for 9-12 months before they become productive. So you can't just turn the tap on and off. You have to have a plan. You've got to understand your data. You've got to understand the market, so you can plan for the future as best you possibly can. Of course, there's always bumps in the road, but it's important from our business point of view is that our colleague welfare, our teams are supported, our team are properly resourced, and to do that, you need planning. You need a plan in place. You need to make sure that's done properly. And you can't have those peaks and troughs and not having an idea what's happening and what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're here today, and that's why we're running this series of shows, to help firms like yourselves and people like yourselves in your position plan for the future, because it gives you certainty of what's coming down the track. And at least you can start to, when you start to understand what's going on, you can have that level of certainty. So the great thing is, memorandums of sale have been better than they were last year, and you said 20%, Mike. So if I had 10% onto 780, that would take me 850. So we're about 15% up nationwide, which is great, isn't it, in terms of gross sales? But we're better than any of those years in 27, 18, 19 or 20, which is pre-COVID, pre all sorts of Brexit rubbish as well. And it's a great position that we're in. Another key fact, we talked about listings earlier, and putting houses on the market is one thing, but there's obvious, and selling them's another. But then what's the fall through rate? Now, I don't know whether your firm operates a no sale, no fee policy, but it's been quite a bone of contention on various previous speakers whether we do it, whether firms should operate that. But if you're going to run a no sale, no fee type policy, you need to understand that a significant chunk of your cases will fall through. So once they get the memo, how many don't proceed? And we've been tracking this throughout the year, and it's still starting to worry me a little bit that the average is, the long-term average is 24%. But as you can see from this fall-through rate graph here, it's actually, since the start of this year, has been rising and rising. It's getting up towards 30% of fall-throughs. What do you make of that then?
Fall-through rate is always a difficult one, because the main factors in play, you need to understand whether it's regional, whether there's the logic behind it. I suppose you posed a question about no sale, no fee. We don't do that. It's ludicrous to do work and to run a business and not get paid for the work you do. And also, I think it motivates the consumer as well to buy into the process. You know, the genuine buyer of that property, they're willing to put their hand in the pocket from the get-go and understand they're committing to it as best they can. Of course, it won't stop fall-throughs from happening, but you've probably got more committed buyers if they're obviously financially committing at an early stage. And there's lots to talk about reservation agreements and lots to talk about.
Yeah, Chris is a big fan of reservation agreements, but
there's lots of talk about trying to tie people earlier. But I think that no sale, no fee can sometimes drive fall through rates, because there's no consequence often for people who do pull out or change their minds or can't get the mortgage they think, or the personal circumstances change. We're quite lucky and fortunate. We complete 92% of our instructions, so we're well above the curve in relation to that. But again, I think part and parcel of that is because of the nature of where our work comes from. They are well vetted, committed buyers generally. And same in relation to the sales, because we don't offer that no sale, no fee. People are more committed and more likely to go through. So whilst there's a business model out there which supports that process, I think you probably see your fall through rates drop if people are more committed financially and understand where they're getting into. I think there's some merit in relation to that. And I'll be honest with you, years ago we did offer it and did do it, but now we're at a position where we don't want to and don't need to. And it's ludicrous, because you pay for everything in life. Why should people work for free or expect things for free?
Yeah, of course. What it doesn't, just because a sale falls through, doesn't mean that client doesn't go on to sell, because he just finds another buyer and
that often is the case. And we often get buyers who are buying that falls through because of a survey, and they will still go on and buy another property, so they're still active in the market. So there's lots of reasons why that happens, whether you don't get a mortgage or whether the survey reveals.
But if there is a nationwide fall-through rate of this amount, though, what it will affect is the length of times of transactions. Because if you're a vendor and you're selling your property and the first guy falls through, and it looks like we're almost at a 1 in 3, which certainly 1 in 4, but 1 in 4 chance of that happening, and then they're going to have to find another buyer, and that's going to take another couple of months, and the whole process starts again.
Absolutely.
So the overall length of time of transaction can be quite long, because or appear to be quite long, because of the fall through rate going up. And that might be to do, in a general sense, to do with lack of confidence. Interest rates haven't come down quite as quickly as people thought, and people are being affected by the higher mortgage rates that are coming through. So maybe that's
there's so many reasons behind that. We have a whole 2-hour debate on transaction times and how and why and who.
Yeah, we'll come back to some transaction times, but I think it's key to know if you're looking at your data, especially if you're getting instructed on vendors at an early stage, that these are there's a significant chance of these falling through. And just to emphasise that point, the 2024 rate is currently at 27.52%, which is pretty significant, but the long-term average is 24%. So in terms of deals being agreed, we saw that it was well up 20%, but actually there's quite a lot of fall through. So there's still some nervousness, still some fragility in the market there. Yeah. Certainly high, more so than we had pre-COVID in the 2017 to 2020 period, where you can see it was 25% or below. It'll be interesting to see how that tracks and what happens in the coming months. And I think a lot of that will depend on what the budget says in a month's time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I think the COVID figures people were very much pushing towards a stamp duty holiday ending, and so determination to get transactions through, different sorts of pressures, isn't there?
Yeah, that's why those 2022, 23 years were out of kilter with the norm, and there was good reasons behind them. So if you then take net sales, now gross sales are the number of memorandums of sales hitting your desk. Net sales are gross sales minus the fall throughs. So this graph here is really interesting. If we look at we explained this before, but for those who are first-time viewers, I'll explain it all again. Let's take the yellow line first of all. The yellow line is COVID year 2020. And what you can see there was net sales, remember, number of memorandums of sale minus the fall-throughs, okay, suddenly collapsed in February, March. Of course it did. That's when COVID hit. We went into lockdown and the whole country shut down for the best part of 3 months. Okay, so there you can see this big dip where nothing happened, and then suddenly it opens up again, and we have Eat Out to Help Out and God knows what else, and the place went mad. And you can see how it reached peaks that we've never seen before, well over 30,000 in week 33. But actually, if you measure the area under the graph post the lockdown and the area, that big U-shaped thing that happened during lockdown, it balanced itself out over the whole period. And you can see how we start in January and it rises quite quickly into the spring, peaks around May or June, and then slowly but slides off throughout the rest of the year. But looking at the white line, which is 2024 here, you can see we're a little bit above the 2017 to 19 average, but considerably above last year. Again, probably about 20%, which pretty much marries with your data.
Yeah, definitely.
And again, so you can see now how it does. Last year, the back end of last year was pretty poor, actually. So people, I forget exactly what happened, but I think people were getting a bit nervous towards the end of last year about rising interest rates, and a lot of firms moaned and said, "Oh, it's not so great out there." So sort of in the August through December period, and whether it will be quite as bad this year, I know Steve Hinchelwood, who was on here from Taylor and Emmett a couple of months ago, was saying he hopes it's not going to be quite as bad this year. We will see. What you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think inflation played a big part in it. Inflation played a big part as well last year, because we're at that peak, weren't we? There was strikes left, right, and centre. If I remember, I know those still went on to this year, but it didn't feel as bad at the start of this year. The impact didn't feel quite the same in terms of the doctors, the trains. So all that has an impact, doesn't it, in terms of what people think and feel and where we're at. And as I say, it does feel there's a little bit more stability and a bit more normality in the world, touch wood.
So it'll be interesting to see that if that white line now stays well above the pink line for the rest of the year, or if indeed it improves a little bit, because certainly the conditions are good. We've got full employment, haven't we, more or less? Yeah. Interest rates are starting to come down a little bit. We've just seen the first quarter point drop. There's enough houses on the market. Inflation's steady. Could be worse for people, so we might see quite a nice end to the year. hopefully. and
fingers crossed.
and we're able to track that through. If you keep coming back on this show every month, you'll see how that progresses. Again, just a final thing. On net sales, 683,000 is 104%, 105% of the pre-COVID average. So again, we're saying that we're back in a much, much stronger position, not only for houses coming to the market, but for actual net sales, including fall-throughs as well. We put this graph in for the first time last month, actually. What's the UK pipeline? Because a lot of estate agents are really complaining at the moment. Their pipelines are at the highest they've ever been, and this is evidence of that. And it will be the same for you as lawyers. How many jobs have you got in effect work in progress, WIP? And it's a difficult thing to manage because you're trying to push things through, trying to get them out. You're taking new jobs on, but how busy are your conveyancers? How many files can they hold? So this is a really accurate way of measuring where pipelines are. And what you can see here is that we're now at a peak, and only matched by the two peaks of the post-COVID years. Much, much higher pipeline work than in the 17, 18, 19 period. And this, of course, will be putting pressure on your staff, your conveyancers, and also meaning that timelines are getting longer again.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't feel that that's the position, so I'm surprised by that data. So our pipelines seem to be steady and moving at a pace, but I think the reality is there is a lack of conveyancers. We know that the market's up; it's slightly above historic averages. Lots of people left the profession following COVID. There is certainly a people skills shortage. We're fortunate we have a very good and strong team. So we are fine in terms of capacity, and we are progressing cases as we would do normally, and aren't quite feeling those pressures we have done in the past. But that's us. So I know we're quite unique in terms of where we are in our market space. So I can imagine other firms, it has an impact in terms of the human resources, has an impact in terms of pipelines and transaction times, which obviously if you don't get things moving and don't get things completed, you're having more cases and pipelines taking longer,
pressure,
which is
and it's cash flow as well, of course. It's
I mean, none of us get paid until those masses complete, and I think there's that old gripe, isn't there? Really, we ought to be all working together. Every stakeholder in a transaction shouldn't be at loggerheads, should be collaborating, should be supporting each other, and should be doing all we can to get those transactions completed as pain-free as possible. And obviously with the consumer and customer service being at the forefront, because we want to make it a good experience for our clients. That helps the estate agent, their reputation, helps the mortgage broker, helps us if everyone seems to be working together rather than putting against each other and blaming each other.
Easier said than done, that though, isn't it? Because
it is easier said than done. But it depends on how
we all say, I'm sure people at Conveyancing Association, Home Buying Centre go, let's have collaborative conveyancing and whatever else. The reality is it's confrontational and people are trying to score points all the time.
For not contentious, it's quite confrontational. We like to think we try really hard in that aspect for us to be collaborative with all those we work with, and build relationships is absolutely key. Because if you do, it makes it easier to deal with situations when there are difficulties in pipelines and transaction times.
Just one little stat point I want to point out. Can you see that at the moment we're at 503845 and Chris Watkins kindly marked that in with a white line. If you look at the white line for every previous year, with the exception of 2020, the white line is the peak moment of the year for pipeline.
Yeah.
So what we are saying here, if you look at 2017, for example, 390,000, that was the peak moment. After that, the pipeline, i.e. the pressure on your staff, then will start to decline now. Through October and November, you will be completing more jobs than you are taking on instructions. And it comes down and down and down until December, when you complete absolutely thousands of jobs and get almost no instructions because of the nature of the job. And that pattern is followed through. So yet again, if your teams are under pressure right now, if you're feeling pressured, if your agents are squealing that things are taking too long, you can reassure them that over the next 3 months, things are going to get better, because that's what the data tells us. It's happened every single year.
And it's interesting as well. The peak is always during the summer holidays. So I know that's just nature when transactions come to fruition, but at the same time, that's
Well,
when human resources are affected because people are on holidays, children
of
are on
course,
school.
of course. So what you've
And it's
got
put all that
there
melting
is
pot. It's
if things that
perfect
take
storm.
if things take 3 to 4 months to come to from memorandum of sale to completion, the peak of instructions is April, May, and then
Yeah,
the completions try and complete in August, but there's no conveyancers around and no one wants to do it because they're all on holiday, apart from the teachers, of course, who definitely want to complete at the end of
yeah,
August.
definitely.
And then come September, it sort of everything, all the conveyancing staff come back to work. People are happy to move again, and those jobs that are ready, therefore that are sat in the pipeline, gumming it up, will start to come out. So you'll see much better completion numbers and cash flow
Yeah,
in September, October. So you'll
yeah,
be feeling a
definitely.
lot better by the end of this month. Drinks are
I
on
feel
mic,
good all
everyone,
the
at the end
time.
of the month.
I feel good all the time.
Oh, yeah. Apart from when Liverpool aren't winning.
Yeah, that's true. Don't mention Nottingham Forest.
No, I can't mention Nottingham Forest on this podcast, can I? Mr. Slade, Mr. Carter.
Yeah,
Last little graph from Chris, this one. Just an interesting one we were keeping an eye on. This was a predictor of house prices. So what we're getting here is if you look at the price per square foot on of what's happening in the market. So first of all, it looks at new listings. What's the price per square foot? And you can see it rose and rose and rose to a peak somewhere around May, but seems to be coming off a little bit as far as listings are concerned. Now, the gap then down is what's the price for sold subject to contract. Now, what you can see there is that from November 23, the orange line has risen quite sharply through to June. So things that have been selling, never mind listing, the prices were rising quite markedly. And then the exchange prices have started to follow, as you would expect. Exchange taking probably 12 weeks after sold subject to contract. So when you think about what's going to happen to house prices, and when the Daily Mail and the Daily Express say prices are going up, prices are going down, they're basing those on either HMRC or HMLR data, which is really quite out of date. This is a predictor of the future, because you can see that at some point in the next few months, we're going to get headlines saying house prices are rising. And they were, because the sold subject to contracts prices were rising, the exchange prices have been rising. But just in the last month or so, we've seen both listing prices and SSTC starting to come off a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the beginning of next year, middle of next year, when they're saying, oh, house prices are falling. Well, we knew that was happening already. We knew back in September 23. So here's your predictor, and it is dead accurate because it's bound to be. You know, pre-predicts what the headlines in the Daily Express are going to say.
They're data sources, aren't they? It depends where you take your data from, what you're looking at, and how you interpret it.
But this is coming from the property portals, and you can see exactly.
Definitely, yeah. It's clearly reliable data.
So then we can move on to the land registry data provided by 20 Convey. Again, unfortunately, that data, the last iteration of it is currently 31st of March. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, beginning of October, we'll get an update to the March, April, May, end of June. So then our next month, we'll have a slightly new set of data. And these are the key facts, though, that we'll just go through before we get to the graphs. Completed transactions to the end of March was down from 600,000, a bit down from the previous quarter. This doesn't take account of new build, by the way, Mike. So we're just looking at the second-hand market here. Average sale price was pretty steady, to be honest. It was down slightly, but only £6,000. Leasehold sales has been pretty consistent at 23%. That probably won't affect you too much in Liverpool. You won't have too many leasehold, will you? It does vary a lot. London, obviously, very high.
Yeah,
some of the
depends
Lancashire
where you are,
towns are quite high because the leaseholds houses. But the key number here is average time to complete between SSTC and completion at the land register down to 111 days. We are expecting that number to rise quite markedly when the next iteration comes out because of this year being far busier than the previous years. Yeah. Okay. And then the other piece of data, which is really interesting, is how long it takes the lawyers to get the registrations into the land registry, and it does vary markedly. And the one that we always refer back to is the average for firms is currently 19 days from completion to the date it hits the land registry. So that's the benchmark. If you're better than that, well done. If you're not, pull your finger out. And the firm that you'll be aware of, this firm, Alexander Grace, beginning of last year, I think, went into administration, didn't have its eye on the ball on many fronts, but its time for post completion was in the 65-day category. 65 to 70 days. So if your firm's struggling with post completion, no doubt it's struggling in many ways, and it's an early warning sign.
It's a red flag.
A red flag. And the lenders are now aware of this and are wanting this data on a regular basis. So be aware that if you want to stay on lenders' panels, you need to make sure your post completion stuff is really on the ball. So we'll run through this slide pretty quickly. These are the largest 10 firms currently. It has changed actually a bit, quite surprisingly over the last few years. My Home Move has been top of that rankings for as long as I can remember. In the last 6 or 9 months, Taylor Rose, which is this consultancy model, has leapfrogged them and is now out there as the largest firm. But even Taylor Rose, with all its 1,000 consultants, only has a 1.9% market share. You can see down here, 111 average, 111 days time to complete is the average across the whole market, and the whole market is about 4,500 firms, and time to complete, for registration, 19 days is the average, and some big variations in there. And we like to give a little bit of shout out to Gorvins, who are a big firm doing lots and lots of completions, but got obviously time to post completion 11 days, so they've obviously got the post completion department sorted out. And then we can narrow in. Now, what we always do on these shows in the second part is we focus in on a particular area. And of course, with Mike on the show today, we thought we'd focus on Liverpool, where it's all going on. And so what we'll do is we start with the Northwest, then go to the wider Merseyside area that includes the Wirral, and then really focus down on Liverpool. And this is the power of this 20 conveyor data, and gives you some really interesting stuff. So you can see here, in the whole of the Northwest, the largest firm is Watson Ramsbottom, with a 1,373. My Home Move will pick up 1,100, so that's unusual for them to be knocked off the top. Well done to Elton and his merry band in Blackburn. And you'll be pleased to see that Bell Lamb & Johnson make the top 10 in the Northwest. So not only the biggest firm in Liverpool, one of the top 10 in the Northwest. You happy with that, Mike?
I'm happy, but when you put it into the perspective of market share, it's a tiny market share, the 4,500 firms who do conveyancing, but it's good to see we're heading in the right direction.
Your total market share of 0.91 is actually pretty small. It just shows if you do want to grow your firm, there's plenty of ways to do it, isn't there? There's plenty of market out there.
Absolutely, and I think we've discussed that before we started about there is plenty of work out there, and it's just goes through cycles sometimes. And you talked before about the consultancy model, that they're obviously gaining people who are joining them who've got a following. And that work then obviously becomes under that umbrella, and there is movement of conveyancers and lawyers between firms, and that has an impact on workloads and new relationships. Interestingly, we obviously work really strong on really spend a lot of time on our relationships, as I say, with agents and brokers and other law firms. It's important to have those really strong relationships because we need to work together. I'm a real strong believer, and we as a firm are a really strong believer that we're all in it together. We need to work together. But you still have those scenarios, and we have it where we've lost work to panels who are coming in effectively saying we guarantee exchange in 8 weeks, which we know isn't possible. And people are like shiny new things, don't they? And it is always interesting when those introduced come back to us with their tail between the legs saying, we're sorry, you're much faster, you're much better, but we had to try it because people promise these things. So I think transparency is really important.
Well, using data like this can help you. It's a marketing tool.
Yeah, definitely help you as well. It's really important, but also understanding that people promising things it's impossible to deliver, and the data is key in relation to that. It really is.
Okay, so let's focus in then, and let's get that's the Northwest. If we then narrow it down just to Merseyside, There's some firm called Bell Lamb Johnson are the big dogs in Merseyside. You're obviously ripping it up. You're even getting Evertonians to blooming instruct you, are you?
Yeah,
do they go to Meggitt's? Meggitt's the Evertonian firm, and you're the Liverpool firm. Is that how it works?
No, we welcome both Everton, Liverpool, Man United, and even Leeds fans. We'll let anyone with a major transaction. We're not partisan in terms of football or anything, really, in that respect.
It's the blue logo behind you. I'm impressed.
Blue's my favourite colour, believe it or not, for a very staunch red. It's good to see. I know that changes from time to time, but I'm pleased with that. Doesn't mean I don't want to
really
stop
interesting there. I'll tell you what I picked up on here is just looking at your Merseyside stuff. Your time to complete is 108, which is pretty bloody good, isn't it? I mean, compared to other than one other firm, that is better than anybody else on that list. I won't mention the firm at the bottom there at 129, but
no, and again, I think it's time to complete is key. We're fortunate that we have some really good processes and workflows, really good lawyers who are all working together as a team to get transactions completed as quickly as possible. Helps we onboard clients on average of 1 day, so that's contract packs going out in 1 day of instruction is our average timescale, which obviously speeds up transactions. But the reality is we are always at the bequest of the slowest in the chain. And there's so many variations.
Sorry, Mike. You're looking at the other firms on that list for Merseyside. Is there an argument for you getting those round the table and banging heads together and saying, "Come on, let's work more closely together"? Because
absolutely,
those are the
interestingly, the second quickest on that table is a firm we're actually on the other side of transactions with a lot. So there's
Hughes.
No, Cook and Talbot. Cook and Talbot are we're often on the other side of transactions. So it's interesting to see that because of that, there's some correlation in terms of time to complete. But as I say, there is so many variations in relation to that. You're only as quick as the other people in the chain. Everyone has different processes. Some firms still send out property information forms to be filled in by hand to clients, which obviously means there's the delay, and we still get those handwritten forms in contract packs. And there's so many different reasons behind it. Clients are an absolute another one. Fascinating. The motivation behind clients, how quickly they do things. As I say, that's our average in terms of onboarding. We have outliers. Occasionally, I was looking this morning, we had one client who didn't complete their instruction forms for 40 days. And that's with us chasing them on a daily basis to get it done. So there's things like that can impact.
Can really skew your numbers out, can't they?
Yeah, really. The odd one like that. We've got a few who. For 28 days, and it doesn't matter what you do to impress the urgency. Some clients don't want to move quickly. It's we think speed and
very valid point.
And everyone's different. I say there's so many factors in play.
Made, and I will make it again on the show now. I've made it to 20 convey on a couple of occasions. When using time to complete and time for post completion, they're using a mean, a proper average mean to calculate that. And I think there's an argument for using a different method, removing a couple of standard deviations either side of the data, and maybe using a median value or a mode value instead of the mean. Because as you quite rightly say, one or two outliers can really skew your data.
Yeah, definitely in those times, and but that's it's good. It's good to see. Always room for improvement. I'm a big believer in just because you're doing something well doesn't mean you can't do it better. Can't work harder. Can't keep on trying to improve, and that's something we're really keen
work
to.
Work smarter, not harder.
But also work better as well. Try and find better ways to do things. Just because something working doesn't mean you can't improve it.
Okay, so there's the Merseyside figure. Merseyside is quite a big area. It's not just Liverpool, is it? You have got you're out to St Helens and the Wirral and
And of course, from our point of view, our historic probably strength was North Cheshire as well. Right. So it's interesting seeing the data from different areas and how that impacts as well.
Okay, so let's focus this in now right deep down into Liverpool itself. So we're now only looking at the local authority of Liverpool. and still doing pretty well, but you're not, as you've probably said, this is something historical. You were more of a North Cheshire-based firm. You dropped to fourth because there are three firms who do more. Probably all that for Robbie Fowler, this lot, don't they? Because he owns that firm full, doesn't he?
No. There's a few in there. Obviously, got long-standing presence in Liverpool. One is associated with an estate agent, a large estate agent, so they automatically get that work from outsource, who obviously do a lot of work. And I say, whilst we are a Liverpool firm and we were established in Liverpool in 1821, North Cheshire was probably our stronghold in terms of our conveyancing arm over the past few years. But we've, over the last 18 months, really had some focus in improving our position in Liverpool.
Well, Mike, I'd be getting out there. I'd take a snapshot of this particular slide, put it on a flag, and walk into every estate agent in Liverpool and show them this, because what it shows absolutely crystal is that of all those firms in Liverpool, you complete jobs in 101 days compared to an average of 115. So you are 2 weeks faster on average than every other firm. Some firms, there's firms at 136, 130. You're significantly faster. So if you're an agent and you're referring work, My Own Move don't have an office in Liverpool, but you're referring work to My Own Move, you should be saying, hang on, use us, you'll get your stuff a month quicker. And who wouldn't want the money and the completion a month quicker?
Well, if you're doing it a month, or even, I say on average, 2.5 weeks faster, that's bringing your pipeline into a year. It's an extra significant amount of transactions in that period of time. Especially if it's a month, it's 13 months and 12, isn't it? So it is absolutely key, and we do work really hard on that speed element. We have three things which really drive our conveyancing side of our firm. In fact, the whole entire firm. Customer service is absolutely key and central. That client journey, expectations, managing that process to be as painless and as customer facing as possible. Our colleagues, looking after our colleagues, making sure that they are supported, invested in, because to have happy clients, you need happy staff. And the third one is technology, and using technology to drive through transactions, have workflows and clever tech, which means we can do things faster and smarter. And put all three together, it clearly has a real positive impact on our time to complete. But I still like to think we can get it faster by working with solicitors on the other side of transactions and trying to help support them and try and help things on that collaborative approach, but also just by educating our clients better. And we're about to try out some real clever stuff in relation to that client journey to get them to react faster, to complete forms faster, and I'm optimistic we'll get that down by this time next year.
Interesting stuff. Yep. Okay, just looking at the last 6 months and how you've gone along in the last 6 months. Again, we're only focusing on the L postcode in Merseyside here, but you certainly seem to be improving your market share. October you were around 5, hovering around 4-5, and now end of March 7% or thereabouts. So you're having that impact.
Well, and I said it was a clear objective of ours to improve our standing in not just Merseyside, but obviously Liverpool City region. We opened another office in the Liverpool City region in April last year. That obviously takes time for that to bed into the community.
Maybe that's what we're seeing the impact of there.
And obviously those relationships, we're working really hard in those relationships, really hard on all the things we do to grow our business, and it's clearly working as the data shows there, which is really good to see from my end that what we have set out to achieve has been achieved.
Excellent. So just moving on to some wider stuff now, and thanks for that focus on Liverpool there, Mike. I like to show this particular graph, and what we're looking at here is the market share by size. So you can see that the largest 14%, the top 20, the largest 20 firms, let me get my words out properly here, apologies. The largest 20 firms have 14% of the market. The 20 to 50 firms have 8%, and 50 to 100 have 8%. So in total, you're talking 22, 30% of the work is done by 100 firms, which is amazing when you consider there's 4,145 in total. Absolutely amazing. The top 20%, top 20 firms account for 14% market share. And what we're seeing is more and more work is getting sucked into larger and larger firms. So the two comments on the right, top 20 firms account for 14% market share, but the smallest 2,901 firms account for another 14%. So that's what makes life difficult, though, isn't it? Those 2,901 firms who are not operating great systems, not investing in technology, and they account for a whole 14% of just as much as the top 20. What do you think to that? Those stats?
Well, yeah, I think we've known that for some time, isn't it? There's 4,500 firms who are doing conveyancing, all at various sizes, all at various iterations. Some are one-man bands, some are small teams, some are lawyers who still dabble in every type of law possible and do conveyancing as a bit part project in relation to that. But I think all the data shows that consolidation is changing. It's getting more and more into a larger pool of firms, up to 30%, as you said.
Apart from those Taylor Rose's consultancy side things, which may be skewing these numbers as well a little bit, because that's really like having 1,000 one-man bands, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But I think you're going to see that continue, not at any great pace, but I think the reality is with the world we live in now of compliance and regulation and the hoops you have to jump through to manage your file, and the SRA have particular interest in AML. Clearly, that's a big driver for them at the moment, and those firms who perhaps don't take it as seriously as they should do, and that's often the smaller ones, will come unstuck, realise what is required to be compliant and to make sure you're satisfying the regulator. Obviously, slightly different for those who are conveyancing firms only, obviously not regulated by the SRA. Licensed conveyancers, but I still think that you'll see more and more people leave the market from those smaller firms or those traditional solicitors firms who just don't see the merit in doing small numbers when the amount of work and process needed to be compliant gets more and more difficult. And there'll be a slow drift towards consolidation, I think, or firms who are committed to doing conveyancing, picking up more market share. But again, market share is small, isn't it? It's less than 2% even for the very, very biggest nationally. We'll see that dial move. We'll see that dial move ever so slightly year on year, in my opinion, because of that compliance element and the work you have to put in to get a matter into a position where it's legal ready, and so that you're protecting yourself, protecting your clients, protecting your culp. I'm a culp. I take it very seriously. To make sure that's in position, it's a headache if you're not doing it properly.
And I would agree with all of that, Mike. I definitely would. Our last slide of the day looks at time to complete. I hear this all the time, that the largest 20 firms are slowing down the transactions. If you go onto Twitter and some of the Facebook groups and things, there's some firms get a really bad rep at the top end. So I just want to drill out some numbers here. And what we're looking at here is the largest... the number of completions a month. Okay, so if you're doing more than 200 completions a month, your average time to complete was 113. However, at the other end of the scale, if you are only doing 10 to 24 completions a month, your average time to complete was 108 days. And the vast rump of firms who are doing the majority of the conveyancing are all, whether it's between 25 completions a month and 200 completions a month, all at 107. So that sort of would say that some of the larger firms, let's call them factory firms, and I know you're not a factory firm here but in this scenario, but some of the factory firms would appear to be a week or so slower than the rest. Would you think would that concur with what you see in the market as a conveyancer?
Yeah, I certainly would. And obviously, you just highlighted our transaction times in Liverpool, 101 days. So they're definitely slower than where we're at in terms of the scheme of things. But you have to understand as well, they're probably in a lot of chains because of their size. see it probably less than we have done historically recently, but certainly they are involved somewhere along the line in a lot of chains. So
Do you
that's
think
kind of
it's
a knock-on
because they
effect for
employ a
those
lot
firms.
of underqualified or less qualified conveyancers, whereas I'm sure some of your staff have been with you for many, many years and have the experience? When there's a churn of staff because they're working in these big factory environments, do you think that doesn't help the
Yeah,
scenario?
there's also that built-in delay as well, isn't it, for sign-off? Because those factory firms will have that process in place where title checks are done by lawyers, but the rest of the transaction are done elsewhere, not necessarily in this country, and so that adds in a level of delay. Why is that's being obviously signed off or being title checked? Whereas we, for example, our business model is the lawyers do it themselves. The lawyers run the transaction, supported by paralegals, so we have direct control over the transaction internally. With that visibility throughout, so not coming to a transaction towards the end, then having to review the whole entire work that's been done, and then identifying some issues which may not be resolved.
Yeah.
So our lawyers are on it at the very get-go. So I think that helps speed things up. But it's business model, isn't it? How you get to the end, and you feel they take a lot longer than that difference, but clearly not.
Yeah, I was going to say that the data would say it's only 6 days, and that's not really a lot, is it? I mean, they get a bad rap, but
it feels longer. It does feel longer when you have those in your chain. But I think the data's also slightly skewed with because they are involved in so many chains and transactions along the way. They're going to have a knock-on effect on other people's averages.
Listen, Mike, I'm looking at the time. We've been going for an hour, so I need to give it a wrap there. And I think that's the end of our slideshow as well. So thank you once again to all the people who have helped put this together, to 20 Convey, to Chris Watkin, to Inside Conveyancing for helping promoting it. Thank you, Mike, for coming on and sparing your time today. Thanks to everybody who's been watching. And we will be back again at the end of October with a new guest and a new area to look at and an update on all these figures. So until then, we look forward to seeing you soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.